everybody. This is T. Falcon Napier. Joining me as always is Dave Miller. Say hi, Dave.
Hello, everyone.
So today what we're going to do is pick up where we left off last time around. We've been talking about how to properly manage someone's level of productive tension, going over what we refer to as the change grid maneuvers. And last time around, we talked about a couple of them. So just as a recap, there are 5 kinds of change grid maneuvers we talk about ultimately. They're named after the direction you would move on the change grid if you employed those maneuvers. And so down grid maneuvers, lower tension. Up grid maneuvers move you up grid, so raise tension. Out grid maneuvers move you over to the out grid side of things, over to the right. And in grid maneuvers move you over to the left side of things towards the in-grid quadrant. PowerPoint maneuvers move you to that purple spot in the middle, the exact center of the change grid, which is the polar opposite of those 4 red dots that we refer to as the powerless points. And although we are looking at 4 of them, when we flatten the change sphere out, flatten out the change sphere into a 2-dimensional diagram, the powerless point now has 4 different locations. Even though it's all the same dot, it's just different ways of getting to powerlessness. Who knew there were so many ways that you could achieve powerlessness? So now, just as a way of recap, downgrid maneuvers, we said that the downgrid maneuvers, again, lowered tension. Before you use any of these maneuvers, there's 2 things you got to know. You got to know where are they on the change grid, and you have to know where do you want them to be on the change grid. Now, when I say on the change grid, again, now we're into lesson 7B. I shouldn't have to remind everyone, but I will anyway. We do not have to have a completed change grid instrument in order to use change grid maneuvers, or to know where are they on the change grid, or where do we want them to be. We know just inside of a few seconds of conversation, even sometimes just by looking at the person, we know they're up grid. And if we know they're up grid and being up grid isn't serving them well, and we know, well, they'd be better off down grid, we could employ a down grid maneuver. I don't need to know the exact coordinates. I don't need to know where they actually are on a diagram. I can do this just based on the energetics of the whole thing. So if I'm picking up that someone is much further up grid, and again, that would mean, all the qualities you know about stress and all that happening, or the up grid danger zone, then I just know I need to lower their level of tension. They need to move themselves down grid. You can even self-apply. If you're feeling up grid, all you got to do is plug into place 1 or more of these down grid maneuvers, and your level of tension will go down. Now, how far down do you want to go? That's where we get to the second question. We have to know, where are we trying to move the person? So if we are way up in stress and being very reactive about a decision that needs to be made, and we say, like, well, spending a bit more time being proactive could be useful. Well, where on the change grid does proactive thinking, proactive behavior happen? Well, I don't need to move someone all the way down to apathy. That would shut that process down altogether. Power is the home of proactive decision making. So I would need to lower the level of tension from stress, or from relatively up grid down to power. And to do that, I would use 1 or a combination of these 4 downgrid maneuvers. And I might do just a little taste of a maneuver. I might give you a whole big dose of the maneuver, depending, again, on the situation, the distance, the intensity with which you're feeling that upgrid moment. So that's, nevertheless, 4 things I can do to lower someone's level of tension is to normalize whatever it is they're experiencing, simplify it by breaking it down into something a little bit more approachable, more manageable. I can restore resources by reminding them of assets, qualities, experiences they already have. Or maybe I add a resource by giving them some sort of insight or understanding or actual core physical resource that could help them to accomplish whatever it is that they face. So anyone have any questions, comments, thoughts to share about downgrid maneuvers?
Well, I know, John and I were talking earlier about something coaches do a lot, which is work with the mindset. And I think I think this comes into play with, and there's a lot of ways coaches do that, in terms of really trying to focus the client on what are you believing about this, what are you saying to yourself. Maybe the coach asks a question to unveil that. Can you speak a little bit to helping someone change their thoughts or beliefs and how that
Hmm.
impacts a
Yeah,
maneuver?
yeah, yeah. Well, I'll get into some specifics, but let's first start with a general understanding of the world of tension management. Everything about tension management is about managing someone's perceptions. So it really is entirely about mindset. So yeah, sometimes in order for us to impact someone's mindset, we will talk about some true physical resources, some things that are actually real in the world of daily living. But the vast majority of the time, we're only working with what's between two people, a person's two ears, and so it really is completely all upgrade, downgrade, ingrade, outgrade. Everything is about mindset. So, for those of you who have studied NLP, neuro linguistic programming, there was a little chart that was shown of the very earliest stages of understanding that model. And that is that a person's attitudes and beliefs lead to their behavior. And so attitudes and beliefs are both things that are happening inside of the mindset sort of environment. So let's think about then about lowering someone's level of tension. What kinds of attitudes might you be working with? What kinds of beliefs might you be working with? And how often is that work really just involving changing the frame that someone has around whatever the situation at hand happens to be? And how often is it about reminding the person of what I say, attitudes and beliefs that they have held in the past that have served them well? So let's kind of play with that. So give me a specific situation that we can kind of work with.
Well, I'm dealing with it all the time in the workshops I'm doing. I'm doing a workshop tomorrow night on how poor psychology is impacting your search and what to do about it.
Okay.
And so, one of the things I was going to do was try to just get them aware of the different ways that the thoughts that they're having that are sabotaging their search, and what could they say instead
Mm-hmm.
to themselves, or what would their best friends say to them to help them see it differently.
Mm-hmm. So just in your description there, it sounds like a lot of that is about restoring resources. So reminding someone of the prior experiences they've had, or sharing a story of experiences that others they know of have had. So I think a
Mm-hmm.
lot of that would fall into restoring resources. Now, obviously, if someone starts talking about um, something they did that this person never even thought about, fine. Now you're tipping your toe into adding resources. But nevertheless, it seems to be working more with someone's perceived availability of resources, and whether you are impacting that perception by restoring or by adding. That really kind of depends on how the conversation is unfolding. But most definitely, that's a downgrade maneuver. I also would believe that a lot of people who are in the similar situation feel as though that's unusual. And maybe the truth is, no, you might be experiencing for the first time, or you might have forgotten you experienced the same thing before, but this is really pretty typical, normal, predictable sort of situation to find oneself in. So maybe a little bit of it is about normalizing. Um, Now, for the fun of it, maybe we could even come up with a way that it gets simplified. Like, let's say, for example, the person has gone on an interview and has encountered silence. And you go like, well, what does that silence really all mean? And so maybe a little bit normalizing. I think we've mentioned this on a prior lesson, but one of the things that happens very far up grid is a fun little process we refer to as awfulizing. So awfulizing is when you imagine that whatever it is that's happening can only mean the worst possible outcome. So you're awfulizing. You're adding this element of awfulness, awful outcomes to it. But awfulize is made up of two words: awful and lies. And so very often what the person is doing is creating this whole drama that is not even happening. So they're telling themselves these awful lies, or putting themselves into a situation whose outcome is very, very bad, but not true. So it's
Yeah.
just, filling the mind with awful lies. Yes.
Yeah, Dave and I, I like that. Dave and I were talking about that today, because that is very common in the job search, that I don't hear from the employer, so I assume the worst. I assume they don't want me.
Right, where if we wanted to normalize that behavior, we could say, well, there are countless reasons why someone might not be getting back with you. That's got absolutely nothing to do with you. How arrogant to believe that their silence is about you.
Mhm.
So it's, we could normalize it. Dave, I see a couple of chat comments are coming in if you want to check those out.
Yeah, Jane's just saying perceptions do not equal reality. When clients are parked in stress, feeling stuck, we navigate together. And then she says, awfulizing is painful for all.
Exactly. Very good. Very, very good. So normalize. Now, simplifying could be more like, okay, fine, you've encountered silence. So now what can you do next? Now, what you could do next might be more about adding resources, but maybe it's a moment of simplification. So do we send a quick little email question? Do we look at a calendar and say, well, we'll give them until this day to respond, otherwise I'm going to reach out. And then I'm sure there's also the thing that says, maybe they're intentionally not reaching out to me, hoping that I will show how interested I am in this position by reaching back out to them. So me reaching out, is that going to indicate that I'm interested or that I'm desperate? And so there's all this, obvious, what we say, storytelling that's going on inside of the person's head, because they're trying to add meaning to silence or whatever the situation might be.
Right.
So another way to simplify, another example of that would be, a lot of times people, John and I were again talking about this, are told, a job search is a full-time job, thus you must spend 8 hours a day. I feel like if you can spend a solid 3 hours a day very productively, that's going to get you going. And that, that takes a lot of the pressure off of people, saying, hey, it's okay if you want to, after your 3 hours, you go to a movie and that relieves stress or something like that, so.
Right, and see, even that is a downgrade maneuver. So what you've done is you've simplified the task by saying, let's lock in a certain number of hours to make sure that we are doing those things that are most important, most valuable, most whatever, inside of that time frame, because I can spend 8 hours being totally inefficient,
That's
or
right.
3 hours being very efficient, and then I can, give myself a little bit of an added resource to better manage my personal level of tension, and whether that's go for a long walk, go see a movie, whatever it happens to be. I know that sometimes people say, yeah, well, where are all the physical things that we can do to lower someone's level of tension? Like, get a massage or whatever it is. That's adding a resource. Unless you've had a massage before and it lowered your tension, in which case it could be restoring a resource. Nevertheless, it's still a resource that's being worked with there.
Right.
Okay, other thoughts about?
The other question I had, which is really about doing workshops, and if this is taking too far off track, we can talk about it some other time. But the whole point of a lot of the workshops I do is providing a lot of advice and bringing people, in effect, out of tension around a certain aspect of their search. But if I'm doing the thing that I worry about is that maybe is how do you avoid overshooting and bringing them so far out of tension that you lose their engagement in the rest of the workshop?
Yeah, you do that by applying the first little principle to using the maneuvers. You know where they're at, they're up grid, because downgrade people usually don't seek out additional education. So we'll assume they're more upgrade. And they might even be outgrade because they're trying to drive this whole job hunt thing. So upgrade and outgrade. In both cases, the desired destination is power. So as long as you are talking about what people can do, you are always talking about moving someone to this level of power. And if you don't want to use the terminology of tension management, that's all fine. You're trying to put them into, now describe power, the most logical, proactive, fact-based, sort of area you can. That's what we're all trying to do. And then at the same time, give them cautionary messages about having too little tension. And we'll talk about that in more detail in a couple of minutes when we talk about the upgrade maneuvers, because while I do believe that there are a lot of issues, that, the subject is about job hunting, where people are too far upgrade, we need to lower them down. Is it really true that the reason why people struggle to find the perfect job or the next job is because they're too far upgrade and stressed out? Or is it because they're too far downgrade? They wait too long to get started. They think it's going to be easier than it really is.
Oh yeah, and then they go straight from
apathy
up to stress.
Right. So I think that as you're structuring your workshop, maybe you start to package it that way, that there are two large sets of behaviors, attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors that interfere with finding the job. There's a whole upgrade set. Let's talk about those. There's a whole downgrade set. Let's talk about those. And then maybe you're kind of balancing it out and ending up in power, rather than fearing that your training itself. That all said, and this is for everyone who's on the call, training is a downgrade maneuver. And so the truth is that no matter what we do, I'm a trainer, that's how I define myself. If I'm standing in front of an audience, I know that I am lowering their level of productive tension because what I'm doing is increasing their perceived ability. That pulls me down. And I am simplifying what seemed to be an overwhelming task, so the perceived level of challenge is coming down. That moves me downgrade. That's why I've said to all of my students and my clients, emphasize it even more, is that all training must be accompanied by an increased expectation of performance. I'll put that in other terms. All training has to be accompanied by a set of upgrade maneuvers. So to balance out. So yeah, I'll give you more of an education. Let me go ahead and advance the slide so you can see. But at the same time, I'm going to say, now you need to increase your standards. So here's some more insight and understanding. Now change your task. Here's some more resources that you have. Now let's make sure that you're doing what needs to be done. So I need to make sure that all training is accompanied by an increased expectation of performance or upgrade maneuvers. Yeah, go right ahead.
This is Jane.
Hi, Jane.
You know, when somebody is so parked and they're so consumed with the story, with just the stress, and they can't let it go, I get to a point where I just ask a question: is who would you be if you didn't care so much?
Oh, very interesting. Yeah.
And then I say, what would be different, and what's blocking you from stepping into that difference you've identified now?
Yeah,
and it shifts them out of just the drama, the spin, the spiral, the stress. And we start to talk and navigate. Go ahead.
And so would you describe that more about helping them restore a resource or adding a resource? You know, if they're imagining a person they've never been before, or deliberately having an out-of-body experience where they're noticing things about them, that might be adding a resource. But because the entire process is happening inside of the individual, are we really just restoring or reminding them that they have capacity, they have capabilities that they aren't tapping into, in which case it's more restoring a resource. By the way, not that it matters which of these four categories we lump a behavior in. This is purely for academic purposes. But
well, I can share with you, I call it let's reset. I talk about rebooting a computer. Let's reset intrinsically. Because where
Okay.
you're going to by default right now is not working. It's
Mhm.
keeping you in a place and you're stuck.
Yep. And so even in the world of computers, we might describe that as restoring
Could be. Mhm.
factory settings.
Yeah, that's true. But the reset would, who are you when you're feeling at peace or that you're not consumed by just what I love your awfulizing.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And letting someone know that they can do a reset may very well be adding a resource because maybe they skipped
Could
over
be.
that page in the owner manual when they were growing up. So,
Well, sometimes we just take a breath and just get centered and just say, let's just begin
yep,
again.
yep. And
Okay.
interesting that you've said that because what I was going to say about John's situation, and
Uh-huh.
I started feeling there, is that maybe we also need to do some PowerPoint maneuvers. And we'll get to those in just a couple of moments. Yeah, thank you so much for that. Okay, anyone have any other thoughts, comments about downgrid maneuvers? Okay, let's move on to upgrid. I love this dialogue we're having around this. Okay, so upgrade maneuvers, just again as a reminder, are used when someone is further downgrid than we really will want them to be. And again, again, if I'm a coach, they're further downgrid than best serves them. If you guys could mute yourselves locally, I'm hearing that wonderful rumble. And so we want to do something to help them raise their own level of productive tension. And we reviewed that there are 4 things we can do about that. Increase the standards against which someone is judging whatever their performance happens to be. Change the task in some subtle or profound way. So no longer are we really focusing on doing A. In fact, what we really are doing is B or A plus or whatever. So change the task in some subtle or profound way. Awaken the emotions of the higher level of tension. So awaken the emotions of power or power stress or perhaps even stress, and boost accountability. So let's figure out what to be done, when to do it by, and then let's see what we can do to help make sure that they stay on track. So these are the upgrade maneuvers. Now, again, we could apply this to John's scenario. That might be something really good to do on the discussion session as well. But a lot of these things are what we're doing for the lazy job hunter. Or let's talk about even executives who left their old job with some astounding parachute. And now they are feeling no pressure whatsoever. They think their phone is just going to automatically start ringing, and it doesn't. And the clock is ticking, and the parachute is starting to, reach Earth. So now what? Now what? And so we have to spend time now saying like increase the standards, change the task, awaken emotions, boost accountability. So, by the way, what you guys said earlier about if you're looking for a job, then looking for a job is your full-time job. That's changing the task. It's changing the frame around the task. So you do that, get it all done in 3 hours instead of the whole day. That's increasing standards and a little bit of boosting accountability if we're going to check in to see if they actually did that. If they're starting to feel bored and complacent and ambivalent, this might be one of those times that the slightest little drop of stress emotions might be useful to them. The emotions of stress were anger, grief, fear, and shame. Perhaps fear would be the best motivator. It's kind of like the clock is ticking, In your particular field, it takes on average X amount of time to find a job. You now have X minus. So let's get going, let's get going. So that's also falls into the category of upgrade maneuvers. And certainly, John, going back to your workshops, I could see how you could do a section of your workshop focusing on those 4 downgrade maneuvers. And again, you're welcome to use this language. You're welcome to show these diagrams, but you don't necessarily have to. You could just talk about those as a set of things to do if someone is feeling upgrid. And you've got this set too for people that happen to be allowing themselves to be downgrid for longer than is restorative. So again, remember, being downgrid is a place where we recharge our batteries, where we do get our rest and we do rejuvenate. And so certainly after the trauma of a job loss, assuming it was something that was not of the person's own choosing, there's going to be this time of healing that needs to happen. Well, that healing could happen inside of a few minutes or a few hours or maybe a few days, but I don't know that it needs to extend for weeks and months. And so it might be time to just say, all right, enough already. Let's move forward. Let's move forward. Okay, so these are the upgrade maneuvers. Now, there are two sets of maneuvers we want to talk about today. These are going to be generally the second set of maneuvers you would move to. So you're going to be doing some upgrade and downgrade or downgrade maneuvers, and then you might say, I also want to move the person further out grid, or maybe I need to move them further in grid. So our first wave of maneuver is up or down to get the person into power. And then we might want to move them in or out. In truth, in practice, you're doing these more as a blend, a custom blend for the client's specific situation. But the general spirit is first, let's get them out of stress or out of apathy. Now they're in the 3 more productive levels of tension. And so now let's start adding the in-grid and out-grid maneuvers. So let's talk about those. Outgrid maneuvers are about increasing a person's sense of drive. So if you remember back to the energies we talked about from the center of the change grid moving out grid, you would move into an amiable driver energy. An amiable driver is a driver for sure. They want to make something happen, but they're doing it by being very much focused on the people involved, how it's impacting others. And then move a little bit further out grid, and now they become perhaps more of a driven driver. A driven driver is someone who wants to make something happen, and they decide to make it happen by making it happen. So they're just driving all through. They're again, you could review the energies and the to really revisit what I'm describing here, but their focus on other people starts to be replaced by more of a focus on the desired outcome, more of a task orientation. And so more and more and more outgrid, 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 outgrid. Now, that's fine up to a certain point, but we all know that the outgrid danger zone is waiting for the driven driver. And so we don't want anyone to be moved so far outgrid that they end up in that danger zone. But if we were to look at coordinates 10, 10, which is on the exact edge of where that danger zone begins, 10, 10 is the place on the change grid where excellence is achieved, greatness happens, because the person is basically saying, I have a very high level of ability. I am tackling an equally high level of challenge. I'm putting myself to the test. So when I put myself in that situation, I have 2 options. I'm either going to win or I'm not going to win. But even if I don't win, look at where I am. I'm still in a place of greatness, of excellence. And so the example I often use for outgrid excellence is Olympic performance. Yeah, you want that gold medal. And to win that gold medal, you have to believe your level of ability is very high, but you're not going to begin to underestimate the complexity of winning that test because you know who you're up against. And so you come to that moment with very high belief about your level of ability, but also an appreciation for the challenge that faces you. In that moment, you hope that you're going to win. I would say we take hope and a level and up a level and say you believe that you're going to win, but you wouldn't say, I know I'm going to win. To say such a thing would put you further out grid. Now there's that level of arrogance, but anyone who is a medal contender at the Olympics knows who they're up against, knows what they're up against. And so, as I said, winning is the goal of being there, getting that gold medal, but you have to believe that if they end up with a silver medal, they might be disappointed, but the ones who will take the gold medal in years to come are the ones who said, what about my performance? Do I need to change? Or what is it that the gold medalist did that gave them that edge because I need to do that? And so while there might be some disappointment in outgrid, I won't call it failure. So that's why I said there's 2 things that'll happen. You're either going to win or you're not going to win. Nobody fails outgrid because the learning is great there. So that's why we say in outgrid, this is where maximum growth is going to occur. This is where greatness is achieved. This is where excellence lives. And so that's what we're trying to do. If we want to move someone further out grid, that's what we're trying to do, is get them in that place of testing, of excellence, of a place for greatness to grow. Any thoughts on that before I talk about how we go about doing such a thing? Okay, so these are the things that increase drive. In order to move someone further out grid, number one, increase risk. So again, I've already lowered their level of tension or raised their lower tension, so I've gotten them into the general vicinity of power. Now I can start moving them out grid by increasing the risk. What does increase the risk mean? It means take a chance. Step into the unknown. Believe in what it is that you are capable of doing. Don't fear what might be out there. So anytime you're working with your clients and these are the messages that you're giving them, take a chance. Believe that this is something that you can do. Know that you are capable of more. This is saying so take that chance. Step out into that. What's the worst that could possibly happen? In the outgrid mindset, the worst thing that will ever happen is not that you will fail, it is that you will learn. And that's the worst. So let's go ahead. Let's increase that risk. Let's take that chance. So make that uncomfortable phone call if you're in the world of business or even personal life. There could be some uncomfortable calls. Take that chance. Make that call. If you're in the world of sales. Make a cold call, reach out. What's the worst? Test rejection. So let's increase that risk. Now, as we work our way on that risk, we could also move someone out grid by appealing to their ego. One of the greatest skills that leaders have is that leaders believe in people before they believe in themselves, before those people believe in themselves. And so if I help the person to see themselves in a different light, if I can help them to change the frame that they put around themselves, so that rather than feeling confined by their current personal definition, we can instead talk about, as Jane pointed out earlier, redefine yourself. So if you were outside of you, looking at you and talking to you, what might you say? So let's appeal a little bit to their ego. I said a little bit. If we spend too much time appealing to someone's ego, we could end up in the outgrid danger zone. By the way, going back to the first one, if we increase that risk and encourage them to take on greater and greater and greater risks, they may suddenly end up in the outgrid danger zone. We often say, as a cautionary tale to people who are in the outgrid danger zone, people out there tend to create unnecessary risk or risk where it does not exist purely to make things more interesting. They stir up trouble just to stir up trouble. Or they stir up trouble because their arrogance and their bravado just leads them to having these superhuman beliefs. And sooner or later, reality is going to say, nope, I run the show here. So, there will be an adjustment that will happen to someone's understanding and definition of self. Questions, comments about that? I see we got some chat coming in.
Yeah, I don't understand it. It's something from Jane.
Then wisdom.
I guess Jane can't unmute herself. I'm not sure why.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, then if the
So I just
I'm unmuted now.
Oh, yay!
Yay!
Yeah, go right
You
ahead.
should be able to unmute yourself, Jane.
You know what? I have a black screen, the slides, and just the chat. That's all that's showing up on my computer.
Really? How odd.
Yeah.
Okay.
Low-tech moment. Anyway, my comment to leaders is, you don't have followers. You are developing future leaders. And every way you're showing up, behavior, attitude, is reflecting on how others are viewing and what they are stepping into.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to make. Particularly one of the programs that we do around the subject of tension management or productive tension is pride-based leadership. And
Hmm.
in pride-based leadership, we really do talk about this third point, the most, inspire people through leadership to a place of leadership. And there are a lot of situations where people believe that their title is what makes them a leader, or their ability to deliver rewards and punishments makes them a leader, or the power that they hold over resource and resource distribution is what makes them a leader. And what they often need to be humbled by and reminded by is that the only thing that makes you a leader are your followers. If no one's following you, you're not a leader, you're just this crazy person who's out there,
Right.
prancing around. And so everything that you do is very much saying to the world, am I someone you wish to follow? Is
Exactly.
this attitude, belief, behavior something you want to emulate or something you want to support? And so there's a lot of leaders in my career, I've met with many, many, many people with tremendous amounts of positional power, lots of resources, all that kind of stuff is there, but forget that there weren't people who didn't want to follow them. They were hated. And so, it's one thing not to inspire people to follow you. It's another thing to inspire people to hope for your demise or actively
Mm.
work on your demise. So, yeah. So what are
See,
you
I often say that position power has nothing to do with the power of your presence, how you're showing up in your mind, your heart, and with your intuition.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, personal power. It's what it is. And people with true personal power have very little use for positional power, even though they may have tremendous positional power. They go, there's no reason for me to exercise that power, because everything happens wonderful when you focus on the people side.
Yeah, it's the platform you stand in.
That's right. That's right. Okay, now the last outgrid maneuver is about providing coaching. Providing coaching, specifically, we're talking about performance coaching. So all other varieties of coaching is what we've been talking about for these past 7 lessons. So that's it. It's specifically providing performance coaching is a little bit more about mentoring someone, perhaps making sure that they do have specific knowledge, specific skills, specific resources, but something very much about fine tuning. So taking that person from being 90% equipped for that greatness and helping them develop that extra 10%. So going back to the Olympic athlete kind of thing, now that's the word coaching is certainly used there, but coaching means multiple things when we're talking about athletic performance. But one of the things that a coach will do in that particular thing is talk about specific performance issues. Now, whether that coach can remedy those specific performance issues is, I guess, depends on what the issue is. Sometimes they'll pull into place a trainer to help the person to develop whatever that ability is, or fluidity in executing that ability. So whatever, but nevertheless, it's coaching specifically about performance. So not so much about the general mindset that could already be very strongly in place. It's not so much about people making the kinds of choices they really want to be making, so being very intentional and deliberate in what they're doing, where they're going. That's all in place. It's okay, now that I've got this person that is 90% towards the greatness they want so much for themselves, how does that impact the kind of guidance I might be providing or the individual may need in order to get them the rest of the way to that goal? That's what we're talking about, performance coaching. I didn't put performance there because physically there really wasn't room, and for whatever reason I didn't want to have 2 lines. Who knows? But provide performance specific coaching. Thoughts about that? Yep. I'm sure many of you work with executives, and as you're working with executives, there may be things coming up, like, for example, where they need to stand in front of a group of people, whether that's a team or the whole company, or get out there with the media, but they need to get in front of a group of people, and now they need to be able to package and confidently present a message. Well, if you're helping them with that crafting of the message, even helping them to get clarity around what they're trying to impart, or what their feelings are, so that it's not just words, but those words are being delivered on this mission tone, then that's also, I think, what we're talking about as an example of performance coaching. Okay, thoughts about performance coaching?
No, I think we're
Nope.
good.
Okay, so again, outgrid maneuvers. And by the way, I would say to you that the vast majority of the time that I have been working with clients over all these years, um, I generally throw in a dose of outgrid maneuvers. Unless the person is in the outgrid danger zone, in which case do not do any outgrid maneuvers. They're far enough outgrid as it is, too far. Um, it's very often for me to say, let's lower your level of tension. If you're up in stress, let's lower your level of tension. So normalize, simplify, and now, we believe in you. Let's go and do something with that. So moving someone down and out is a very common combination of maneuvers that I'm sure all of us as coaches and human development professionals would do. Also, a lot of times we're working with people who are very far down grid, and now we're helping them to find mission and vision and purpose, and so we're moving them up and out. So there's almost always that element of outgrid maneuver. Yeah, Dave.
Well, outgrids where the change happens, right?
Yeah, well, definitive change only occurs two places on the change grid. There are outgrid changes and there are upgrid changes. Upgrid changes occur because circumstances outside of the person, things in the environment, impose themselves on the person and say, ha ha, got to do something. So if your house catches on fire, something external has happened that is very much motivating you to change. You got to do something. If you lose your job, something upgrade happened and now you have to change. So there's a lot of changes that people make that are upgrid. These are driven by external factors. But certainly in the world of coaching and other aspects of human development, we really want to focus more on outgrid changes. Outgrid changes are internally driven. They are driven by choice, by intentionality, by a deliberate assessment of current and desired situations. So it's all choice driven, it's internal. And so whenever we possibly can, we want to cultivate that individual's internal environment so that they can make the kinds of choices that they really want to make, but coming from that inside place. So I've always thought that what we try to do is equip people to handle upgrid situations, but we also want to cultivate the person to be able to do internal changes or outgrid changes more deliberately. Let's talk a little bit about in-grid maneuvers. Interestingly enough, in-grid maneuvers are only used, I want to say this, in our professional work. I would hope that we would only use in-grid maneuvers when someone is in the outgrid danger zone. That said, you all know that tension management is happening continuously. All aspects of life are impacted by tension management. And a lot of times your level of tension is being managed for you because you are unaware of the fact that tension management is even happening. And so there are a lot of things that go on in daily life where external forces are imposing themselves on us and moving us around on the change grid in order to have us be in a spot of the change grid where we are more willing to relinquish the control we have over our own lives to the others. And so now we're talking about manipulating someone. So there will be a lot of in-grid maneuvers that might be happening, but I can only hope that none of us would be doing this to someone. So it doesn't, that sound mysterious. So let's talk about what in-grid maneuvers are. In-grid maneuvers, again, move the person into a mindset where they believe their ability is less than it really is, and that the challenge is less than perhaps it really is. So shrinking someone's perceived ability, I don't know, but that kind of feels fundamentally wrong to me. Now, if the person believes they've got some wild level of ability, that the rest of them will kind of say like, no, you don't. That's also a little bit of an in-grid maneuver, but now I'm only moving you, one little notch by helping you to embrace reality. I'm not trying to move you to the in-grid danger zone. So let's talk a little bit about the things that reduce someone's drive, and then hopefully this will all make a bit more sense.
Well, isn't it like a reality check on that? So
yeah, and again, now we're talking about the out-grid danger zone.
Right.
So just try
exactly.
to go, like, but yeah.
If someone is really overshooting their perception of their ability, I know it goes against maybe the natural inclination of a coach to bring them down to earth, but if that's going to serve them,
well then, but then for let's just say you guys are all, most of you are parents.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you've had plenty of situations where your children believed that they had far more ability than they actually did.
Absolutely.
And sometimes you go like, well, we'll let them learn that for themselves. And other times you go like, no, they could get hit by a bus, So it's like
100%.
Yeah, so this is times when you go like, they need an in-grid maneuver, they need it fast.
Right.
So, it really all depends on the circumstances. But in our role as professionals, we will rarely use in-grid maneuvers in our work with professionals. Nevertheless, you got to know what they are. So you can do them when the situation arises, but also, I like to think this program is equipping all of you to actually be more aware of tension management in your own life, so that you can go like, they're trying to move me in grid. So, stop, devil, stop, So I saw that there was some comments coming in, Dave. Anything there you want to share? And while you're looking that over, I'll say
Jane asked a question. She wanted to have you say more about dealing with arrogance or excessive ego.
Yeah, in fact, we'll talk about that with these in-grid maneuvers. So for our little situation, let's imagine we were dealing with some sort of an executive who is very full of themselves. They are out-grid, they are misbehaving, they believe the rules do not apply to them. They could be coming across in many different inappropriate ways. So whether they're saying inappropriate things or doing inappropriate things, maybe they're even being demeaning, cruel, mean, whatever. They're just this very out-grid person who is burning bridges, damaging relationships, causing all kinds of trouble, and you've been brought on board to help this individual. Now, whether they brought you on board because they recognize that that's who they are and they want that to change, boy, that would be a particularly evolved situation. But usually, in my experience, it's been that an individual is viewed as having great potential for advancement in the company. However, they're a bull in a china shop. They're not very much of a people person. They're lacking in that other part of leadership. So they might be able to handle the tasks fine, but they're coming across in ways that rub people the wrong way. So let's talk about that. They're in the out-grid danger zone. Now, being in the out-grid danger zone is often the result of someone's personal insecurities. So the truth is that while they may have a high level of ability, they feel inadequate. And so they have to represent themselves as someone who has an even higher level of ability than they really possess. They might also fear that people might not view them as being special enough, so they want to make the challenge of the things that they're doing actually appear to be greater than they really are, just so you think they're some sort of a conquering hero. So they'll have a tendency to over-represent the level of challenge and over-represent their ability to do something. And they're doing it as a coping mechanism. They could be doing it strategically, but more often than not, it's about their a defense mechanism or a protective mechanism because of their insecurities. Okay, so that's the situation. So what do we do in order to move someone out of the outgrade danger zone? First thing we can do is decrease the risk. So say to them, what you're trying to tackle right now is not the place to be, maybe not even the place to be procedurally. Maybe they say, before you try to attack that, maybe you should attack this. So before you're out there trying to do something that grand, let's do something that's on the way to that outcome, but is still more manageable, more approachable in the moment. This is particularly important if that person who's in the outgrade danger zone is in a leadership role, because they may be asking people to make a far greater leap of faith than those people are ready to make. And so the leader appears to be taking a far greater level of risk than the followers are comfortable rallying behind. If, on the other hand, that leader would say, and again, we're helping the person reduce the risk, we say, rather than ask them to make that big of a leap, just ask them to make the next logical step. So let's not jump into the deep end. Let's just kind of dip our toe inside of it. So reducing the risk. We might also say, let's say they're trying to position themselves to be that great leader or to get that big job, that big promotion. We say, well, before you do that, here's something you can do. You don't need to create so much, take on so much risk in order to move forward. So again, reduce the risk. Now, I'm not trying to move them all the way to zero risk. I'm not trying to move somebody to the in-grid danger zone. We're just saying, like, mellow out, get out of that danger zone. So let's just reduce the risk just a little bit. Appealing to their nobler motives. Remember that the further outgrid you go, the more task-focused you become. And, or more importantly, the further outgrid you go, the less people-focused you become. So people that are in the outgrid danger zone actually believe that everything that they've accomplished all by themselves. That there is no one else who was ever involved, no progress had been made at all until they got involved, and so that they tend to be credit mongers. They want to take full credit for everything, and obviously that alienates them. So they could be achieving great things, but at the cost of alienating themselves from the people that they need to have following them. And so what we say for appeal to nobler motives is stop for a second, and instead of facing forward towards your desired outcome, turn around, face behind you at all the people who have brought you to where you are right now, who are supporting you in this moment. And more importantly, look at the people who are now beginning to turn their back, who are now beginning to doubt your leadership. Now is the time to remedy that, to re-rally the crowds or whatever. So you have to appeal to their nobler motives. You are here because you are trying to accomplish something of greatness for people beyond yourself, for a time beyond this. And so that nobler motive says that this isn't about you. This is about the role that you are serving in achieving greatness far beyond you, or what is so it can't be about you. So appeal to their nobler motives. It's about other people. It's about other times. It's about, yeah, so appeal to their nobler motives. Seems like you're getting lots of comments on that. So Dave, you want to share what's coming in?
Yeah, let me unmute Jane.
Well, I just said that the nobler is just well said. You know, so much of it is fear-based. And until you raise their awareness to shift out of that moment or that mindset or that energy of just intensity, nothing shifts. So this was really well said. So thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Yep, appeal to nobler motives. Now, the next one is about reviewing boundaries. And this is where we're getting into the harsh reality of life in our society as it is right now. People in the outgrid danger zone believe that the rules do not apply to them. That's one of the big worries we have of someone who's in the outgrid danger zone. They do take risks because they believe they'll never be held accountable for something, because they are too prominent, too wealthy, too powerful, too something, that suddenly they believe they can get away with anything. And unfortunately for the whole world, those behaviors ultimately damage a lot of people, and given a certain set of circumstances, that's going to come back to haunt you. And certainly if we look at what's going on today in the world of entertainment executives being held accountable for behavior in the past, and certainly many, many others situations we can look at, your past comes back to haunt you. And it's because you overstepped a boundary. And so sometimes we need to remind people who have got all this positional power, all this whatever, who have got all of this outgrid sort of mindset, we need to let them know the boundaries exist and they apply to you. So you can do X, Y, and Z, but if you cross a line, you've crossed a line. And so let's remind you of what the boundaries actually are. And then let's remind you that it doesn't matter what your positional power happens to be. It's got nothing to do with how powerful you are and how important you think you are and how much money you happen to have and blah, blah, blah. None of that matters, because if you cross this line, you will be held accountable. And now even today we're saying, like, you're going to be held accountable for something you did decades ago, because people got pushed so far by this outgrid behavior that now you have a true rebellion going on. And the costs to be paid are severe and very far-reaching. So we could say to the executives now that we're working with, you need to understand the boundaries. You need to operate inside of those boundaries, or you need to recognize that there will be a day of atonement. So reviewing boundaries with someone. Okay, and then the last one is increase introspection. People that are in the outgrid danger zone tend to be very outwardly focused on the surface, very outwardly focused in their behaviors, but there's something happening internally. There's something going on inside of their spirit, inside of their personal belief systems, their attitudes, their confidence, anything that's going on inside of them. And we need to be perhaps reminding them that to move forward, they may need to move inside. And the more they spend understanding themselves, I forget who was the Oracle Delphi, know thyself. And so increasing this introspection helps that person to better connect to what their beliefs are, their mission, their vision, their purpose, their sense of self, the belief they have around the role and the impact they can have. So all those sorts of things are what we're talking about when it comes to increase introspection. So before you behave in an outward way, spend some time on that inward journey. Yep, thoughts about that?
It's Anne. A question. Number one, I'm enjoying all of these, but this in particular. The drama teacher where my daughter's in school is a seriously outgrid danger, kind of lives in the outgrid danger zone. Mm-hmm. It also seems like, and I'm certainly not her paid coach, but I'm her booster club president, and some of this would be helpful. She doesn't seem like she's going to be one very receptive to these suggestions. The least receptive. So can you make any comments about that?
Yeah. Remember that the further outgrid the person is, the more entrenched they are in their grandiose sense of self. So it's not at all surprising to think that the further outgrid they are, the less receptive they are to even looking at themselves. And at a certain point in time in the outgrid danger zone, even this set of maneuvers become impossible to deploy. And in that case, we can only hope that they will cross a boundary, and when they cross that boundary, they will be removed from that position of power. So that's the nice thing, is that sooner or later people in the outgrid danger zone will self-destruct. The question is, how much damage do they do in the meantime to themselves and others? So that's that. So what you can certainly do if you're describing this borderline impossible situation is you have to ask yourself, who is it that will enforce those boundaries? Because they need to get involved. Before the boundaries are blown all together, we can basically say, here is sufficient evidence that boundaries are being crossed. before the consequence becomes too great, the people that are being damaged as a result of this, what can we do to enforce these boundaries? But trying to appeal to that individual's nobler motives, trying to get them to increase their introspection at a certain point in the outgrid danger zone, that is no longer a realistic expectation. Yeah. So other thoughts on that?
T,
Yep.
what if she's not that? I mean, I do think there's a place for her to be introspective, and I do think she has noble intentions. So
Yeah, then she needs a coach.
okay,
Someone who's going to and again, she has to willingly participate in this. I mean, but there is also, court mandated therapy, but that's not what we're talking about. So, if you believe that there is a willingness to at least pause for a second, you're going to have to create a very private opportunity for that to happen, because the person who's in the outgrid danger zone doesn't want to be exposed. Anyway, in fact, they have to be able to make these changes and that in a way that protects their own mythology. So, we can't dress them down. We have to make sure they can save face. It all has to end up, these changes have to end up becoming their idea as they are representing these changes to the world around them.
Well, and that makes sense, that as we're appealing to their nobler instincts, that we shouldn't then go into our outgrid danger zone of dressing them down. We still need to hold on to our nobility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but here's the thing, is that in order to get their attention, and again, this may be outside of your scope as a coach. This is just you, because you said you are also personally involved in this, because you have an individual in your life who's being negatively impacted by this person's behavior. So now we're no longer talking about your behavior as a coach. We're saying that you could give them a dressing down, and such a dressing down may need to happen in order to get their attention.
Okay.
So sometimes the people who break the rules have to be arrested.
Okay.
So that arrest, the person who's doing the arrest is not a coach.
Right.
Right.
It's another form of meeting someone where they're at, right?
Exactly. That's just the way that it is. And so someone needs to come along and say, you have crossed the line. You are really behaving in ways that are not serving you well and damaging others, and I will not sit silently by and allow it to happen. That's not the words of a coach. That's the words of someone who is either being personally negatively impacted or is witnessing the negative impact happen to other people they know about and care about. So now you're an interventionist. So, and even then, I'm even saying, like, even then, an interventionist is supposed to be a third party that's coming into the situation to be of service. That's a very different situation. But nevertheless, we talk about managing tension. Managing tension is not a skill set limited to a professional's deployment. Managing tension is something that every single person does every moment of their life and every little angle of life that happens. And I put that out there with great confidence. I mean, go ahead, try to find one situation where some aspect of life has got nothing to do with tension management. I promise you won't find one. So life is tension management. And so a lot of these techniques we talk about may not fit into the domain of what's appropriate for our business role, but we are still a whole person with a lot of other roles that we serve, and some of the behaviors may be totally appropriate for that hat we happen to be wearing.
T, this is Kathy.
Yes.
I'd love to comment on this piece. I've been listening very, very carefully. That when you introduced in-grid maneuvers, you talked about it as something that we do very rarely, or that we do in situations where someone is in the outgrid danger zone. Mm-hmm. What's so interesting is that we are surrounded now, societally and possibly personally, mm-hmm. by extreme outgrid behavior, and the extent to which we can begin to hone our skills in-grid maneuvers. It's not something that I have really spent a lot of time on. Mm-hmm. But, I'm thinking that what an important skill set for
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
a number of number, whether it's personal or professional, given the incredible degree of out-grid
Well,
activity and behavior that we're seeing in this world right now.
Well, here's the thing about that. If we wanted to apply the principles of tension management retrospectively, look over the course of all of history, I would suggest to you that what we are witnessing today in terms of out of control outgrid behavior is nothing compared to what people witnessed in outgrid out of control behavior if you go back hundreds of years. Go back to, you know, medieval times where everyone was under the rule of, you know, some king who had a whim, whatever, you know, by definition they were an outgrid kind of thing. I think that what we're experiencing today is a greater level of awareness of that outgrid behavior because of our access to media.
Yes.
But there've always been evil outgrid warlords, and you know.
Oh, absolutely. But I think because the awareness is there, you know, it's such an important skill set now. Yeah.
Right. Well, in fact, the reason why all these outgrid, you know, warlords or whatever other word you want to give them got away with it for so long was because people didn't, not enough people knew enough about it to be able to coordinate any kind of a defense.
Yes.
And so now, because of the speed at which we all become aware of everything that's happening, you know, on the planet, it's amazing. The awareness is now vast, and the ability for those people to join together is, you know, is also vast. And so, yeah, but that's what's going on. So, yeah.
Well, and then you throw in the aspect that the media does maneuvers themselves.
Oh, of course they do.
They're pushing sometimes the people out grid.
Yeah, well, in fact,
with their message.
We could look at all media outlets across all the different forms of media and say, where do each one of these media enterprises live on the change grid? Because there could be media enterprises that are simply very far down grid, and their whole thing is, you know, I just want to gently inform people of what we're noticing. Fine. There could also be very reactive media outlets that are all up in stress. The skies are falling, and they want to. There's also outgrid ones that are very calculated, very much maneuvering, very much have their own agenda. And hopefully, there's one somewhere that's just in the middle of the grid and saying, "Everyone, just take a breath, separate yourself." And
that's the Hallmark Channel.
That's the Hallmark Channel. Well, what it really is are. Some of the more fact checker kinds of organizations are just saying, like, there's no agenda. The only agenda is what's actually in truth. So these are highly research oriented. They're more interested in what actually is the truth and not trying to position one way or another. The problem is that all these outlets are run by people. And what's the likelihood of us finding a person, even one person on the whole planet, who has zero agenda? Who has zero impact or feels zero impact by anything that's going on around them. Everybody's leaning one way or another. And so, you know, unbiased, I don't know there's such a thing as an unbiased person. Maybe if we put together the right set of people, their individual biases neutralize one another, and you end up with something unbiased coming out of it, but I don't even know how to go about figuring that out. So everything's biased. So, okay, but to the degree to that bias is certainly very different. So those are the in-grid maneuvers: reduce risk, appeal to nobler motives, review boundaries, increase introspection. We do have one last set of maneuvers we'll be going over. We'll save that for next time around. We'll be talking about PowerPoint maneuvers. So between now and then, give a little bit of thought to what sorts of things center you. When you're feeling out of sorts, too far upgrid, outgrid, downgrid, or in-grid, what kinds of things do you do to move yourself to a place of centered, balanced harmony, from which you can then make whatever your next next decision happens to be. So give some thought to that. We'll pick up where we left off next time around. So thanks so much, everybody. Bye for now.